Welcome to Application Risk in a Nutshell, a condensed presentation on how to assess, manage, and ultimately mitigate material application risk. I'm Sebastian Holst, Chief Strategy Officer at Preemptive Solutions. If you'd like to learn more about the topics or technologies discussed here, please visit us at preemptive.com. The first step in effective risk management is assessment, and application risk management is no different. The goal is to be smart, but not paranoid. And we found that a simple checklist is often the best way to begin. 3 checklists to be more precise. Beginning with what your app does and for whom. Does your app perform critical operational tasks inside your business or for your customers? Does it generate revenue directly, either inline or through licensed sales? Do your apps process private or sensitive data or access critical systems? And more broadly, do you run your applications inside a secure or highly regulated environment? What we're trying to capture here is actual value, not the amount of effort or the complexity of the app itself. The more valuable or vital an application is, the more valuable a target it becomes. Next comes the risks that flow from your application's runtime environment and your distribution channels. Is your app .NET or Java, or are you targeting mobile devices? Each of these platforms come with their own set of risk-based requirements. Do you deploy across a distributed supply chain or inside customer networks? Both risks and the exposure can increase significantly beyond your firewall. And finally, are your apps deployed across borders? The more open the runtime and the more distributed the environment, the more likely that bad actors will get unauthorized access to your applications, and the greater your potential exposure. And last, but certainly not least, is assessing your own appetite or tolerance for risk. In other words, what keeps you and your business up at night? Are you subject to regulatory or compliance obligations? Does your business have exceptional operational liability, as is typical inside manufacturing, transportation, and aerospace industries, for example? Are you especially vulnerable to reputational risk, as is often the case with consumer services, retail, and entertainment? And who isn't focused on managing financial risk? But this is often especially critical for developers inside software, finance, and e-commerce driven businesses. And lastly, intellectual property, trade secrets, copyright protection. Intellectual property theft is becoming especially important in today's world. Not only do you need to prevent the theft of your patents and trade secrets and licensed IP, you have to be able to prove in a court of law that you have a long and public track record of protecting that IP. Well, at least if you want to have any hope of successfully prosecuting your attackers. If you've checked even 2 or 3 of the dozen or so assessment questions, you need to establish some sort of risk management policy around your development activities. Now, risk management is nothing new, and the good news is that when it comes to application risk management, the fundamentals really haven't changed at all. Risk can be effectively managed through the consistent application of controls. And the most important thing to keep in mind, and this can sometimes be especially challenging for engineers, is that controls were never intended to eliminate risk, only to make them manageable. Effective controls make living with risk tolerable. So effective controls not only prevent threatening incidents from occurring, they detect, defend, and ideally take corrective actions when threats do arise. And in some of the most mature settings, controls include incident monitoring and audit functions as well. But in all cases, controls must work their magic without undue risk, cost, or effort of their own. For application controls to be effective, they have to manage both the core risks stemming from your assessment checklist, while at the same time minimizing any potential risk that may stem from the control itself. These can and often do include introducing bugs into your applications, compromising user experience, or overcomplicating development or operations. And of course, there's the risk associated with implementing the control. What is the implementation effort required? What is the quality of the control itself and the viability of any associated suppliers? In other words, the cure cannot be worse than the disease, but it can't be a placebo either. Luckily, this is not as complicated or daunting as it may first seem. There are long-standing and well-understood practices to mitigate these risks using proven and widely understood technologies. Now, there aren't too many technical subjects where Microsoft, Apple, Google, and Oracle have all been in agreement over the last decade. But hardening your code against reverse engineering and tampering is one of those rare exceptions. Microsoft has been including obfuscation in the form of Dopfuscator Community Edition, technology that prevents reverse engineering and tampering, as a standard developer capability since 2003, almost since the day that .NET was created. Since 2002, Sun and now Oracle and Google recommend ProGuard, a SourceForge open source obfuscation project for both Java and Android applications for processing sensitive licensing or financial data. And the same holds true for iOS. A similar open source obfuscation project on GitHub began in 2004. This initial project, ClassGuard, has recently been supplanted by PPIOS rename from Preemptive Solutions. In fact, it may be worth noting that not only is there broad consensus on the merit of obfuscation, 2 of the 3 de facto standard technologies are in fact developed by one entity, Preemptive Solutions. Now, free is good and probably enough for many developers, but for organizations that need to ensure their application controls are keeping pace with attackers and evolving platforms, and need to include advanced detection, defense, and correctional capabilities, the open source and community editions simply aren't enough. Now, there's a healthy collection of commercial-grade application protection solutions for these more demanding development communities. And not surprisingly, Preemptive offers solutions for .NET, Java, Android, and iOS. In fact, one of the very few to cover them all. Now, there's one more step in the maturity curve of application risk management. Organizations that care enough to secure their applications often need to know how these applications are being used, when they are under stress, or perhaps under attack. Vendors, including Microsoft, New Relic, and Google, just to name a few, have brought application monitoring solutions to market. All of these leverage multi-tenant cloud architectures, powerful and effective to be sure. But for those organizations that, for security reasons or simple logistics, cannot connect their applications to a public network or a multi-tenant platform, Preemptive offers an on-premises endpoint as an alternative. So here's what we've covered. Work smart, but don't be paranoid. Set meaningful goals to make risk levels acceptable, but not to try to make your business risk-free. The best way to meet these goals is to implement effective and reasonable controls. Again, the cure cannot be worse than the disease. And leverage proven practices. You want to be both more secure and have the evidence to show auditors and the courts that you've taken every reasonable precaution to manage your risks. It's important to always be mindful of 2 things. First, only you can assess your own risk, but also the cost and penalties that come from poor risk management practices are in fact understood all too well.